Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Well, hello once again, Sue Rose Minahan. And tonight is November 2nd, 2019, and this show repeats on Thursday morning at 6 to 7 in the morning. However, Seattle is just now at daylight time, and we will be at standard time. So you can go to talkcosmos.com, where all the schedules and the guest information and all that good stuff is, and just lead on from there according to wherever you live. And we are in the Scorpio archetype. The sun is in Scorpio, and this program works on many perspectives and aspects relating to the Scorpio archetype of, it could be anything. And tonight, it's about impassioned and inspired souls and Day of the Dead. Yesterday was the Day of the Dead. And I just returned from Mexico actually on Halloween, and they were preparing for the Day of the Dead in all its glory. I was down there for this wonderful retreat with Gemini Brett. You can go to his site, GeminiBrett.com, and find out his retreats. He's a guide of the stars and a great shamanic information and wonderful teacher and good soul. And we were located in first Mexico City with another wonderful astrologer, Ursula Stockter, who has her home is a retreat, really. And she has many, many functions. And in case, I must say that if you're ever looking to have a spot in Mexico City, you would be in good hands. And you can find her at ursulas.com.mx. We traveled over to San Miguel de Allende, and just outside of San Miguel de Allende, which is a little north outside of the northern area of this enormous city, the second largest city in the world, from what I was told, I think by a cabbie, but must be true because it was the largest, believe it or not, 20 years ago. Most amazing, like 1 out of every 4 lived in this enormous city. So San Miguel de Allende is up north of it. And there we stayed at this wonderful retreat called Los Silos. That's L-O-S-C, not C. I'll say it again. LOSSILOS.com. .mex. Everything is .mex, M-X. And this area had talk about transformational time. We had a sweat lodge. There's little kind of bungalow areas, and there's a yoga area. There's outdoor. Again, if you're looking for any kind of fantastic food and close by and sanctuary with the stars, and I already said yoga, didn't I? That would really be the place to go. The transformational process and the impassioned part of Scorpio is so significant for this emotional sign that digs for truth to uncover and reveal from their essence in their preparation of rebirthing their soul. In a nutshell, impassioned is demonstrating intense emotion. It's a profound feeling and sincerity on behalf of the user, as I found in the dictionary. And it did come from suffering. It's from Christ and like Day of the Dead, which has ancient roots, which we will talk about, has been transposed by the Christian church into All Saints' Day. It's a time when the veil is so thin. It's a dead of winter. Well, in many ways, it's the dead of night, when everything appears to be not living. Yet that is when the roots or growing. And that is when the freeze or the cold forces the seeds to germinate and begin to grow. So it's much that's occurring in preparation for the spring and that new birth. And this is where I will say that in San Miguel de Allende, there were arches of stores just covered in marigolds. And I looked up marigolds. It again comes from the Christian Mary and has the joyous many attributes to it. However, when you read further, it's also about the sadness, and it is about the death of connected to death because of the odor. There's embalming ointments. So there's this huge transformation connected totally with Scorpio, Day of the Dead, the ancestors, etc. And we'll begin our talk tonight. Katherine Metcalf from East Moline, Illinois, is returning. She was here earlier, I think for June, but I'll double check with her. She's a professional astrologer, a hypnotherapist, an intuitive, a tarot card reader, does consultations, and hosts, actually with transits and career is her really great focus, among many things, and hosts herself a monthly meeting and teaches astrology and tarot at Blackhawk College in Molina, Illinois. And she's an author of various magazine articles and has a YouTube video program. So, hi, Katherine. Once again.
Hi, Sue.
Right. When was
Thanks so much for having me on. It's so much fun to be here.
It is. It is. And when was that talk so that people can go to Talk Cosmos or Podcast One now that we have all the archives?
Oh my gosh, girl. I'm like in my, I
think it
turned
was
60
June.
this year.
Ah, ooh, you're going to get that magical return. That's excellent.
I think it was sometime in June.
Yes, that rings bells. Okay, because I kept putting it down and I thought, oh my gosh, but good enough. That's great. Well, Day of the Dead, or let's start there. It's such a ancient, back to Samhain, right? That's how you say it?
Back to Samhain.
Samhain, yes.
Samhain, yeah. Well, Day of the Dead, traditionally is celebrated like October 31st. It starts then. It goes all day November 1st and November 2nd.
Yes.
So we're still kind of in it. But yeah, it goes back to the Aztecs traditions. And I think they probably, did things differently back then. But now, like, it's so cool that you were just there in Mexico and that you got to see, how they were decorating the streets, for with all the flowers and, families will get together. It's honestly, I think maybe people that aren't familiar with it, they see all the skulls and,
which I saw.
It might freak them out a little bit.
Well, down the avenue in Mexico City, there were they were from a distance, but they had to be at least 5 feet high, just painted all over the place. But in San Miguel de Allende, and they'd come from the parade that had been previously, still in preparation, because as you say, it's several days of really intense. And the marigolds were just in baskets and bountiful in not every doorway, but many doorways.
And that is so cool. I know when you told me that you saw the marigolds, and that's interesting, the research that you did on it about the that it has to do with Mary, but there's some sadness and then some rebirth with that energy of the marigold. Because when I was in India last year, marigolds were strung and you would buy them before you went into any temple. And then you would leave it at the feet of the, whatever deity you were going to see. Well, so whether it was Ganesha or Krishna or whatever. So, so the marigold thing is fascinating.
It is.
So it must be a great flower for honoring people.
Well, perhaps I can just add that part of it is that Mary had a purse, and legend says that when the thieves took her purse, this was also part of this little research, that marigolds fell out of it. So they were thinking that it was used as part of coins, but really you can dye things out of it, so it has some value. And then besides the embalming, and plus the fact that it there's many healing and cleansing tonics, so it has so many purposes.
That's so cool.
Amazing.
In the Mexican culture, and this goes all over, Central America as well. It's basically a day when they honor their dead. So their family members that have passed on, they'll get out photos and they'll create altars, and they'll have food and drink, and they'll play their favorite music, and they celebrate their lives. So it's not a sad thing. Or they go right out to the graveyards, and they take a picnic. So I love that. I think it's a really awesome tradition. And because the veil is so thin, these 3 days between our world and theirs, it's just easier to communicate, with them. And with Samhain, that's actually a Gaelic festival, but it's the end of the harvest season. And so it's the beginning of winter. And we talked about this the other night, Sue. So it is the dark. It's halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice.
Yes. All the fixed signs in astrology have these really meaningful, ancient celebrations. And a lot of them are concerned with the Celtic. And because the Celtics weren't, I was so interested, they used to be all over Europe before they were, as we know of them now, more in the Ireland and Scotland and Wales. In fact, I was also looking up, there's a goddess, the mother goddess called Cailleach. And I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. There were so many ways to pronounce it, but I couldn't figure it out. Cailleach. And she was the divine hag's head, or the divine, the older woman part of the goddess, but yet the mother of all goddesses. And she had this staff, or a hammer, and she'd clunk it down on the ground, and it would make it like cold, hard all the way till spring. But she had 7 periods of youth, which is so interesting because you think of it, there were 7, if this is the 8th month, no, that's not true. I was thinking since spring. At any rate, 7 periods of youth, and she outlived all the men. They all died, but she had all these grandchildren and children of the tribes and races. So that was part again of this fertility, yes? There is a real correlation to life.
No, absolutely. And Scorpios are known for, having strong sex drives.
Yes.
and the death and rebirth thing, the transformation, and they have huge, intense passions. So whether, and for the people that are listening, if they know a little bit about astrology, it doesn't have to be Scorpio, just a Scorpio sun. It could be if your moon is in Scorpio or Pluto is in Scorpio. There's a whole generation. There's, if there's your midheaven or your rising sign is in Scorpio, there's going to definitely be an intense factor to you.
Indeed.
So, and most of them are highly intuitive as well.
It is, because the search is really like a psychological, there's so many ways to look at it, but it isn't, it wants soul growth. And so therefore it's going to really intuitive, and it's also looked at, well, they say hidden factors, but it's really that occult, the changes, I don't want to say mystical, but yes, but it could be, I think of that as Neptune, but the reaching of what gives life and we are spirit. We are not just flesh and bone. So, although it,
Right. Yeah, I found it really interesting in doing some research on um, some people that have, strong Scorpio in their chart. So I'm a Gemini sun, but I have a Scorpio moon. So, and it's interesting because, outwardly your sun is like your face that you show to the world. So people always think I'm this, sweet, bubbly, outgoing, effervescent girl, which I am outwardly. But at home, which is our moon sign, it's our emotional side. It's our more intense, our more private side. So our spouses or our children or the people that we have in our home see our moon signs more.
yes.
And so with my moon in Scorpio, I'm a pretty intense individual. And, one of the things, well, the intuition, anybody with moon in Scorpio's got great intuition. I mean, I think that's just an automatic given. But the other thing about Scorpio moons is that we're very private. So we actually, like, I love having alone time. It's almost like I absolutely need to have that just so that I can kind of recoup my energy. And for my Aries husband, that was a little challenging. When I would go in my office and close the door. But I also, when I was looking at moon in Scorpio, I was curious to see who else had that trait. And Nostradamus, who most people have heard of, he lived in the 1500s, and he was an amazing
Prophetic.
Prophetic, yeah.
Mystically.
Teller of things to come. Yeah. So I think most people have heard of him. He had moon in Scorpio. And then a more modern day mystic is John Holland, who is he's a psychic medium and he speaks to the dead. So, and he's one of my favorite. I've seen a lot of mediums over the years and in person and experienced them. And John is one of my favorites. He's just so right on and honest and yeah, he's amazing.
I've heard only good things about him. And in fact, I know a woman that is working with him, I think, that's from Seattle here. And so, yes, he's of integrity. Put it this way.
Yes.
He is
Yeah,
of integrity.
absolutely.
And that's another part of it. It's like if you're going to have soul growth and root, thinking about the roots, you need to have that in good soil. In other words, well aligned, because otherwise things, they end badly, as and that's why it doesn't live long. I'm talking a little abstractly here, but yes. And about the private time, that is so necessary. We all have Scorpio somewhere in our house. My Mars happens to be there in the 8th house. So that gives, I think, some indication of, well, there's various things. My Pluto's out of bounds. There's.
Well, your intuitive gifts are there too with Scorpio and you're really in your 8th house. I mean, that's a psychic house.
Yeah. Oh no, I did not mean to say that. It doesn't rule. It would be, and that's a good comment. No, mine doesn't rule it, but my Mars is there. And
okay.
Yeah. And
yeah.
So it's like everything. You see a house, but you enter it from different angles, right? So that in that case, because the point of the private time is that the answers are within, and one needs to have shamanic processing of symbol of power. I mean, if we have soul growth, I keep using that emphasis because essentially we have a soul, and Scorpio is our soul, and it's a connection of our body with spirit and our soul. And to make it alive, we need to have it be fed, you could say, with life. And so from what I was reading, I think it was by Jeffrey Wolf Green, who did evolutionary astrology a lot, and he has a Pluto book, and he was mentioning that with Scorpio, that one embody. Well, I don't know if embodies is. Yes, it can be. It can be embodies, but takes symbols of power and it intimately incorporates them, which sexuality is part of that. A union between two people.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and it could be of any other power. So it needs that alone time. That's my wrap up talk. Go ahead. I'm on with the moon. Lead on, Catherine. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the power aspect of Scorpio too. I think that power and the positive. I think positively Scorpios desire power. The challenging side is that they can be, manipulative. Like wherever you have light, you have dark. So, right, with even Day of the Dead and Samhain and all that, with the cycles of, life. But I actually did some research too on people with Scorpio suns. And, there are some powerful people there, like Hillary Clinton, who was born October 26th in 47. So, I mean, she was the first female senator in New York. And she was also the first woman to be nominated for president by a major party in 2016.
Yeah, broke
so,
that.
I mean, that's a huge accomplishment, whether you like her or not.
A mixed bag for many people, but yet, I mean, regardless, she broke that ceiling. It's true.
Right. And so that's a great power, positive power thing. I think she's a positive power for women. And then the negative side of that power part would be somebody like Charlie Manson, whose birthday was November 12th, 1934. And he was a Scorpio, and he was an expert at, controlling and manipulating
magnetic
people. Oh my God. He had intense magnetic attraction to, females, and got those, people to basically do his bidding. And, 9 people were murdered from his cult, or his cult killed 9 people.
Yeah, I think I read that the judge would not, something about they would not let a jury talk with, they wouldn't let Charles Manson talk to the jury because of his manipulative powers. And there is, I think people are giving, and so they want to listen. And somehow, as he said, he knew enough of people's psychology, because it is a very introspective sign. Psychologists galore have this archetype within them strongly in order to, figure out their emotions, in order to build their emotions. I mean, most people find I will say, from a positive standpoint, people find the root and purge the old and realign themselves to the better. But there are people that know the weaknesses and play on it totally in order to empower themselves. And there you go. He was one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a good list so far. I know you have quite a few others too. And this brings up again I call it duality, but the shadow and the strength, because passion itself, it came from the suffering. You look at the marigold, this used in the various cultures of many joyous things connected with Mary and joy, and then again the sadness and the torture of it. So a passioned life. I'll just comment here a note that I had, because it was a big long. It's called Passionate. Anyway, yourimpassionedlife.com, and it was trying to get people to feel impassioned because of the joy and confidence. It says, and sense of freedom and passion, because essentially, and this will lead on to our other people that you've brought up, is that it was saying that which goes along with the psychology too of why Scorpio is such a devoutly determined, leave no stone unturned, to get down to
Right. They're always digging to the truth.
Yes.
Always, always,
Yeah.
always, and they're those people who, when you say, I love you, they're going to go, why?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mean it?
you
Or
know?
yeah, like what is that? What's the connection there?
Yeah. What's involved with that?
But on the good part is if it's true and aligned, they are loyal and with
Oh,
life,
yeah.
yeah, the commitment is pure because it says it's here, passionate people can change the world. So
Mm,
it's really a matter of raising the vibration, which that's easy. Well, it is. It's like going through the channels. You have to go through the fire, really,
right.
sometimes in order.
Yeah.
Oops. You know
Well,
what? Catherine will be right back because then we can go on with your folks. But this is
okay.
Talk Cosmos, November 2nd, 2019, returning on the 7th in the morning. And I'm speaking with Katherine Metcalf about Scorpio and its impassioned life. We'll be right back. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Scorpio, traditionally ruled by Mars, now ruled by Pluto. By departing a cycle based on comparison between extreme energies, finding balance, Scorpio commits a relationship to exchange resources, experiencing power and powerlessness for the purpose of soul growth transformation. As a fixed water sign that is extreme, intense, and secretively deep, Scorpio's passionate nature questions the psychology and mystery concerning life and death.
Hi, this is Liz Machette, astrologer, tarotist, Reiki master teacher, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars.
Wherever you go, Alternative Talk 1150 is here for you.
Hi again, Catherine. It's Katherine Metcalf here on Talk Cosmos, November 7th, and it's in a Scorpio. We're talking about Day of the Dead and impassioned souls. And just to remind you, you can, if you missed part of this, you can go to podcast 1 or go to Talk Cosmos and get the link there and find out about Catherine too. So you have quite a research here of other intense souls. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So, so having a Scorpio moon, I like to do research. And, and as Geminis, my son is in Gemini, so we're just curious about everything. Yeah.
Excellent.
So I looked up, famous people with Scorpio birthdays and then Scorpio moons and Scorpio midheavens and that kind of thing. So, what I found interesting with a couple of famous Scorpio women, like Julia Roberts, birthday is October 28th, 1967. And, when I first saw her name, I thought, well, I don't know that I would consider her like, really intense and transformational. Maybe she is. I don't obviously know her personally, but I loved the movie that she did, Erin Brockovich. She made that back in 2000. I can't believe it.
Rather
almost
legendary.
20 years.
Oh my goodness.
But that was a true story about contaminated water in a community. It was a real story, about this woman who was a whistleblower, and she stood up and she made everybody aware of it. And I thought that was interesting because Scorpios will stand up and fight for what they believe in, and it's also a water sign.
Thank you. And Catherine, I have to say to the audience here, because I am such an evolutionary astrologer, but I am recognizing, and I do work with traditional ideas. I'm not just one focus. And Mars, when you say fight for the cause, of course, I don't know her whole chart, but Mars was a traditional ruler. And that's what Mars does. It doesn't just make arguments. It fights for a cause. It defends. And water, absolutely. Anything that's toxics are, between, I think, Pisces and Scorpio. But yes,
Yeah.
it's dirty.
And then she was also, so this goes back into the power aspect of Scorpio. She was also the very first female actress to be paid $20 million for one movie.
Oh, my.
So that was another, breaking the glass ceiling moment.
And that's resources, other people's resources. Very Scorpion. I mean, that's what, we're connected. And we, how do people make money? They make it through selling or negotiating something, some kind of resource. So that's significant.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a big part of Scorpio. So, and then Katy Perry, whose birthday is October 25th, 1984. She is, a singer. She was the first female artist to have 5 #1 songs on one album. And the only other person who had done that prior to her was Michael Jackson.
That's huge.
Huge. Yeah. So there's another, woman breaking the glass ceiling kind of thing. And what was really interesting about her was that she actually came from an evangelical family. They were born again Christians, and they actually traveled around and did shows. And her very first album was a gospel album. And then however many years, so that was in 2001. And then in 2008, so here's the transformation part.
Yeah.
She went from this nice religious, little girl to breaking out, and became totally famous for the song I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It.
That's revolutionary too. And that makes, I was just dividing the years. I wonder if that was an Uranus, something to do with Uranus. But
oh yeah, 7-year movement. I bet it was.
But I am so impressed so far. The #1, Hillary for presidency and leadership, as far as a woman goes, and Julia Roberts, the first being paid that sum of money, which is enormous, $20 million. And and then working with such a legendary story as Erin Brockovich.
Yeah.
For the
those girls did Scorpio proud.
Wow, I'm like, what a league. Yeah. And then Katie, that's really quite, talk about enormous transformation. They talk about transformation. Sometimes we live in such a quick age. I wonder if people sometimes think it's like taking a remote and clicking a button, or taking the frozen food out. Not that I believe in frozen food, but or let's say whatever it is, and defrosting it. But no, it's like structurally the whole thing changes, like the butterfly from the cocoon. It's not the same critter, and that's just sort of a she really changed. She emerged as to her empowerment of her voice, her song.
Yeah. And what she sang about.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah, having the gay movement of life, which actually corresponds with, what was her birthday? Oh, 1984. So she's a Pluto in Libra too, isn't she? Redefining relationships.
Yeah,
Pluto
that would
again.
make sense. Yeah. So, and then some other research that I found. Now, so this is the October 25th birthday again, but on the male part. And this is, instead of Katy Perry, we've got Pablo Picasso.
Oh, wow.
So, and he was born in 1881, but he is absolutely one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. So, and he lived a very interesting life. And anybody that knows his art, he went through multiple periods and different styles of painting. I mean, he's basically started out classically trained and then got into the Cubism thing. And then, when you and I were talking the other day, you used this comment that you were like, he ripped apart and recreated art. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what he did.
Oh, thank you for remembering that, because I thought, boy, that works.
Yeah.
even rhymes. Yeah, I'm really glad that you did look him up, because as we were commenting about people, he is so prolific. He did thousands of painting, and I love art. My grandfather was an artist, speaking of ancestors, and I used to commune with him all the time as a kid. And I'm pretty visual. If I can see it in my mind, I can remember it. That's why I have trouble with names, because I can't spell it. I have no idea how it's spelled, so I can't say it. But he would shift his whole style, is one way to put it. Kind of like the Beatles, listening to the Beatles growing up too, where
Oh, yeah.
people would get so attached because people were familiar with. There were like stage people. You're supposed to be a certain character, and that's what you're supposed to be. But no, these people are like, I'm going to be me, kind of like Frank Sinatra singing his song.
Yeah, then Mick Jagger came to town, right?
Yeah. And so, but Jagger really, they're so much themselves, but their music doesn't shift like John Lennon's
Right.
would. I mean, you go from Abbey Road to the I Saw Her Standing There. I mean, that's a huge change. And then the Walrus and Yellow Submarine, and then other stuff. And then so same thing with Pablo Picasso. Nothing was sacred. He, like you said, thank you for reminding that. Ripped it apart. What a vision.
And he was born a Catholic, and then he became an atheist. And so there's that, transition, whether it's psychological, religious, holistic, whatever, there was a transition there. And then he also became a communist, which was different than what he was initially in 1944.
Yeah.
So, and then he lived up to the sex part as well. He was married twice, and then he fathered several children, not necessarily, with his wives.
True.
And had multiple affairs. And then his last affair, I think that I read about, was he was 63 years old. He was married, and he had an affair with a 23-year-old woman.
It does seem there were quite a few people then that had quite an age gap. Of course, there's so many ways to look at things. And I'm also thinking of the communists. Back in 1944, it was such a theory. I mean, theory and practice. They hadn't gotten to the practice part yet. They were still in this huge ideology of theory about for the people. And it seemed on paper pretty good. And then things didn't quite work out that way. But I'm thinking of Charlie Chaplin, too. He was a huge age spread. So it's hard to know when it comes to different cultures too, ancient cultures. I mean, it's like trying to suspend any kind of judgment is what I'm doing, because there's along with it, certain cultures are accustomed to being cared for, and then out of respect and blah blah blah, and then maybe who knows other reasons, but.
Well, and I think in Europe too, just being elderly, it's totally looked at and treated completely differently than it is here,
And that gets back. Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and I think, men having or women having affairs in Europe was way more open, and, it wasn't odd, like in France, to be married and have a mistress. So.
Which says, yes, a lot about a lot of things, but exactly, culture, and we're changing it all the time. But let's see, what did you say, though, that I wanted to get back to about, oh, gosh darn. Okay, never mind. Lead on. We'll get back to it.
Okay. So another interesting one that I found was November 11th, 1974, Leo DiCaprio, who was is an American actor and producer, and he's also a very active environmentalist. He has actually made $7.2 billion so far in films. And he's very well known in that industry for taking risks and playing really complex characters. So where he actually becomes the character.
Total transformation, deep psychological commitment. Yet he really makes a character live, like the Titanic. I think that was the first one
Yes.
I
And
saw, and he's just
yeah.
like emblazoned in my memory. What a well, if you're romantic at all, it'd be like,
Yeah.
oh yes,
Yes. Every woman loved that movie, I think.
yeah. It wouldn't have to be him, but someone. It's like, and it's so great. It's just to love. Yeah,
Yes.
but the risk part and complicated, like you say. And then you were mentioning too, he defended the pipeline. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
The
He actually
environmentalists.
went out and physically protested at the Dakota pipeline. And he's made documentaries about the environment. And he was on the World Wildlife Fund board. So, I mean, he's very active environmentally, and a lot of the
Committed.
stuff that he does is water oriented.
Yeah, he walks his talk. The saying, you walk your talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another film, and I can't remember the name of it, that he did where he changed. He was like a airline pilot, and then he was a doctor, and it was based on a true story of a guy who just would decide that he was going to be a doctor one day, and he would walk into a hospital, put some scrubs on,
Oh
and
my
operate
gosh.
on people.
Oh my gosh. I think I read about that
Catch
somewhere
Me
else.
If You Can. I think that's what it
Oh
was.
dear.
Catch Me If You Can.
Well, I think I saw him in one where it was related to drugs, but he was so convincing in all of it. He really commands the depth. The depth, that's another thing. There's nothing superficial about true
No.
embodied Scorpio, which is the glory of it. And again, I want to mention to people, we have every sign somewhere in our chart. There is an area, actually rules my third house. So I guess I do talk a little bit. Committed, right? Yeah,
And you like to talk about getting to the truth, right?
Yeah, I do. I love it.
Yes.
Let's get down.
Yes. And it rules my second house. So, my values and how I can earn income, right?
Oh, yes, through others. Which reminds me, here we've been talking about other people, but you are an intuitive and you have a good, solid, active career of working with people. So
Yes.
I don't know if something comes to mind about, well, I'll start off with myself here for a moment. And that was on the 1st. I had just come back from Mexico on Halloween. And so that morning I was reorienting in my house. And for some reason, and it's not a large little place, but it's good location, so size is compact and used well. And I have a glass case that I managed to get thrifting, I think. And with all our memoirs and important things in it, largely from my father, some of them, because I cared for him. And long story short. So the point is, without thinking, I went over there and I was pondering some of these items, and I noticed something, memorabilia that he'd picked up from Mexico that I'd seen at the archaeological museum. And I was pondering my father and that. And it dawned on me, this is Day of the Dead. What a great connection, to just be drawn to all of that.
Yeah.
So
That's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah. And I, as a kid, I mean, I've been able to communicate and hear. I'm clairaudient, so I hear things. So and I can smell things. I don't know why, but I can, sometimes when people visit, it's like if they were a smoker, I can smell the smoke, or if they were known for wearing, a specific type of perfume, I would smell that. But ever since I was a little girl, my mom died when I was 3. And and my aunt was kind enough to take me into her home and raise me. And then my 2 sisters were raised by my uncle. But I can remember distinctly being a little girl and smelling, when I was sad, smelling flowers. And I would look around the house and I could never see them. And, I'm like, why am I smelling flowers? And it wasn't until years later that I actually found out from my sisters that my mother used to wear like this eau de toilette lilac,
Oh
you
boy.
know,
Oh, I can smell
scent.
that right now. That was a very old and very special. Somehow, yes, I love to smell things. That
Yeah,
very
yeah.
light
So
and just
that's what I
beautiful.
would smell as a kid when I was sad. And I'm sure it was my mother, coming around me, spirit,
Mm,
her spirit, her soul, whatever, coming around to comfort me.
that's
And then I, would hear her, say my name as well. And so, I've had multiple, psychics tell me, oh, your mother stuck around her spirit. I mean, our souls never die, so they're always around, but sometimes in different bodies and different forms, whatever. And one of the psychics that I had gone to when I was younger said, oh my gosh, your mother stuck around for so many years because you were a troublemaker. So she was always worried about you.
oh.
So, and I thought, oh God, I better be good so she can get on her way and move into her next
Oh.
life.
Oh, you must have a great connection. That's so beautiful. Yes.
So, but I set up an altar for Day of the Dead too. And so, I have one of my favorite pictures is of my mom. She was built like Aunt Jemima, and she would wear these big scarves on her head and just soft, squishy woman, and there's a picture of her with my two sisters before I was around, and they're holding a puppy, and just loving up on the puppy. And so I put that picture there on my altar with my dad that raised me, who was really my uncle, and my two sisters have both passed away. Um, so I had the tribe there. I had my grandmothers and my grandfathers there, and the ancestors and friends, and people that I have loved and lost. And it was just a beautiful day. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be now, during the Day of the Dead. You can do it any time. But I absolutely loved taking the time setting up the altar. Like, I have an altar all the time, but I took everything off and made one for Day of the Dead, just with the photos of the relatives. And I put, I didn't have lilacs or marigolds. So, but I just had, some little leaves from outside, that I um, put on the altar with, a candle and some incense. And I put chocolate kisses on there because I wanted everybody to know I'm sending them kisses. And,
That's
and I
wonderful.
put each person that I looked at, I took time looking at each person's photo, and I picked like some of their favorite music and I played that.
Oh, music
So, yeah. And so the
does
dogs
connect.
and I like danced.
Oh, I love it. You know, when my father died, one time, oh, we danced this Norwegian song. He came from Norway as a little boy, and so there was some record there, and that was one of my most endearing, supportive memories after he died,
Aw.
because my husband and I, along with one of my sisters, for the first year she helped, and then it was my husband and I for the next 2.5 years. So it was quite a long stay. But and I could, really, the feeling of the ancestors that they can support and the respect. We traveled across Mexico back 20 years ago, and between cities, I think it was Puerto Vallarta to San Miguel de Allende, actually,
Mm.
and it was on November 1st, and there was a cemetery, a small cemetery. But as we passed by, it was so impressive. Every stone was white, and
Hmm.
every person, it was crowded, was wearing white. I,
Yes.
never thought of that. And there's one other thing, I'll mention this briefly. But today in Seattle, in the newspaper, the Snoqualmie tribe is purchasing a Salish lodge, and Salish is, one of the tribes here. But what struck me was this whole Day of the Dead idea, because this fellow, Michael Ross, he remembers visiting Snoqualmie Falls, a huge, great, big, beautiful falls just north out of Seattle. Not very far, 20 minutes or maybe 45 minutes. And with his great-grandmother, it says, in the mid-1990s, he was 5, and she was at least 100. And Ollie Moses. So she had spent most of her life there, and she was so upset with how people would throw trash. Well, anyway, now they've purchased this. It's been a long battle with another because they want to keep it sacred. And it says they called the purchase the start of a healing process of decades of desecration. So, let me think.
That's a good sign. That gives me hope.
Yes, yes. So,
Yeah.
like you say, the ways that the altar, and I love the idea that it can be a continual practice, visiting and making those memories.
Yeah, yeah, and that just bringing that Scorpio energy into it. It's transformation. I think that the United States, our Christian culture, whatever here is so we bury them and we cry and we move on, and I don't know, for me personally, I actually love the idea of celebrating them and talking about them and remembering stories about them and dancing to Hello Dolly. Okay.
Oh, that brings the marigold joy of life part. Thank you, the passion. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll mention right now that next week on the 9th, there'll be Dr. Judy Safar, and she's from Massachusetts, and she's been on once last year for Sagittarius. So there's a archive for people to look at if they want on Talk Cosmos at Podcast 1. You can see it, or else just go there to my website, and you can find out about Judy, and you can find out about Katherine Metcalf, who's been on with me tonight from Illinois. And so you have active
Thank you.
parts, and your video monthly event too. We'll be talking about the full moon. Pardon me. We already had the new moon. Yes, so we have a few minutes here, Katherine. And I was thinking, the chart. I looked at, I don't know if you have it there, but Mars is squaring the nodes. But Mars is also here we have the two rulers. We were talking about purging and getting to the root of things. And here we have these two rulers or guides, however you want to speak. They used to be called rulers. Now we call them guides, influential planets. The traditional was Mars, and since 1930, it's now Pluto that is ruling Scorpio. But they're in tension with each other, and it seems to me, looking at the whole thing, and of course, though Mars is but Mars is in the relationship sign of Libra, so it's as though and then of course we know that Pluto is with the March, with our lunar south node and Saturn all in
Capricorn.
Yes, Capricorn until January. For those astrologers they know it, but for the non-astrologers, that's what's happening. So we'll just talk this lingo. But it's as though we're really wanting deep resolution, fighting really for resolution and fundamental values of truth.
Yeah, well, and that's showing up in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's a big battle for truth there, and it's affecting all of us, it's actually affecting people worldwide too. They're all wondering how we're going to come out of this situation. So
we're so connected. We really are. And this is true. It's it does. It's not to be, Yeah,
I
I
don't think
went.
it's an accident that it's happening in the Scorpio, Scorpio sun energy either. So,
Like let the truth, let the light be revealed. Out of darkness, there's always light. There is that
right.
energy.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I was the first to think of it, but there's crystals down there too. Well, Catherine, it's been wonderful. You're always such a treasure. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah. And we thank our wonderful audience, and we'll be back again. This is Talk Cosmos, November 2nd with Sue Rose Minahan and Katherine Metcalf, Illinois. Check us out on Talk Cosmos, and just have a great week.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.